Hey guys, here is a story that if it was not recorded, I would not believe it. I'm talking about the passing on of Zoleka Mandela, who was buried this past Friday. She passed on Monday, the 25th September, was buried on Friday, 1st October 2023. Now, when we look at her life, which is the first thing that I want to do, Zoleka Mandela was a daughter of Zinziswa, known as Zinzi Mandela, with Zwelibanzi Hlongwane, who was her father. Her parents met in the early 1980s while they were students at the University of Fort Hare. They married in 1980 and had 4 children together, namely Zoleka, Zondwa, Bambata, and Zwelabo. So, now we have established that contrary to the media claims, Zoleka was a Hlongwane and not a Mandela. In Xhosa tradition, a child born in wedlock is never called with a mother's surname. Only a child born out of wedlock is called by her mother's surname. Even in such a case, it happens until a certain ceremony is performed to take the child home to her father's house. Only in circumstances where the father is not known does the practice of calling a child with a mother's surname allowed. For the purpose of this video, therefore, we would refer to Zoleka only by her first name for reasons that may soon be clear in this video. She was born in 1980 and suffered sexual abuse as a child and battled drug and alcohol addiction since she was 9. In 1997, at the tender age of 17, she gave birth to a firstborn child whom she named after her aunt, Zenani. For the purpose of this message, we shall call the child Zenani Jr. Unfortunately, in 2010, at the age of 13 years old, Zenani Jr. died in a car accident on her way back from a concert that marked the opening of the Soccer World Cup in South Africa. By this time, by her own admission, Zoleka had not seen her daughter Zenani Jr. for 10 days before her passing because she chose to use drugs, as she said in an interview with the Associated Press in 2013. She went further to state, "That's obviously a reminder that I chose my addiction over my kids, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life." Close quote. The horror and guilt jarred her into seeking help and going into rehab for the good of her other child at the time, her son Zwelami, and the memory of her daughter Zenani, she said, that is Zenani Jr. She was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2011, barely a year after her daughter's death, leading to a double mastectomy and grueling chemotherapy. Her second son was consequently born prematurely in 2011 while she was being treated for cancer and died days later. This means by this time she only had 1 child, Zwelami. She has since given birth to 3 more children because at the time of her death she had 4 surviving children. In her autobiography, she claims that when she was 1, she was smuggled into Robben Island, which was a high-security prison, to see her grandfather, Madela. She goes further to claim that as a child she hid a grenade in a school bag so her grandmother, who was part of the armed resistance to apartheid, would not be arrested by the regime. She was abusing alcohol by the time she was 9 and later doing lines of cocaine daily, the start of an addiction that led her away from her own children and towards the greatest of regrets when she was an absent parent at the time of her daughter's passing. But her life changed and her story ultimately closed with a different chapter. She became a renowned campaigner both for cancer awareness and also for road safety, winning praise and admiration for her work in both fields and for her courage in the latter stages of her terminal cancer. On the 7th of April 2023, Zoleka wrote a list of people that should not attend her funeral if such an eventuality was to materialize. One of the people that are named there is King Buyelekaya Dalindyebo, Mandla Mandela, as well as her aunt Zenani Sr., amongst others. Now, my analysis of this letter with due respect to Zoleka and her wishes, is as follows. The dead do not get to tell the living what they should do except to make reference to their will and testament. Therefore, Zoleka should have told the people that she wrote in that list that she did not want them in her funeral, even if all she did was to write them letters. But she should have told them while she was still in the body. When you look at the names in the list, you realize that they emanate from all the families to which she is linked, from her grandmother and grandfather's family, to her father and mother's family, to her cousins, and even a king of the Tembus, Zoleka Mandela. Zoleka accused 3 people of committing a serious offense against her, the offense of sexually molesting her in Madela Mandela, Zoleka Mandela, and Mike Siakamela. This is unfortunate because none of these, to my knowledge, has been reported to the police. This seems to be an attempt on her part to find them guilty in the court of public opinion because she knows how emotional people would be at the time the letter is made public during her passing. To me, this is equivalent to an attempt, at least on her part, to induce a mass psychosis to the public in order to receive their sympathy, whilst the accused receive outrage instead of the presumption of innocence afforded them by our Constitution. Whichever way you want to look at Zoleka, she clearly was a troubled child. It appears to me this continued right into her adulthood. She also wanted to leave a divided family behind by her actions of the list she created. Even worse, she placed on that list her aunt Zenani Sr. This is rather strange if you consider that her firstborn was named after this very aunt that she now did not want to attend her funeral. The same aunt that the media now blames for coming up with a court interdict preventing Zoleka from being buried between her grandmother and her mother's grave in fourways. The media really lost an opportunity here because they could have ascertained from Aunt Zenani her reasons for her conduct by a simple interview. Some reports in the social media claim that she had already been buried and she was dug out of the grave in fourways to be taken to the gravesite that her ex-husband bought some years ago. This is the same husband or ex-husband that she did not want in the funeral, in terms of the list, according to the list that she wrote. However, the truth is far from it. We do not have evidence that Zoleka's body was exhumed. What we are told, or rather what we know, is there is an interdict that was sought by her aunt, and we do not know the reasons why she sought the interdict, but we must consider that the court granted such an interdict request, thereby indicating a good legal reason for such a conduct by Zenani Sr. Nevertheless, legal reasons do not always conform to our moral standards of behavior. I will therefore not comment on her reasons because they are unknown to us. What we know from the media is that by the time the funeral procession got to Fourways' gravesite, Aunt Zenani and her police were there, and therefore she was stopped, or rather the procession was stopped from burying her there. This does not happen in any family as far as I can recall. So this obviously points to a family feud that is so deep that it carried through beyond life itself. But here is another thing that has never taken place in any family: the list written by Zoleka of people who shouldn't be attending her funeral. So there are lots of firsts here. But I don't believe we as the public have any justification to take sides in a family feud, particularly for a family as peculiar as this one. The bottom line though is this: it's her funeral. So if she didn't want those individuals in the funeral and she told them prior to her death, then it would have been reasonable for those individuals to have respected her wishes. Now that Zoleka did not tell them this with all her presence in social media, it becomes difficult for a reasonably prudent person to understand the noise the media is making about her wishes not being respected. Here is the other dilemma. Her non-communication created a situation of who was going to enforce this. I want to repeat that. Here is the other dilemma her non-communication created. Who was going to enforce this? But if she had reported Mandela, Buyelekaya, and Siakamela to the police, for an example, as a sexual abusers, she could have obtained an interdict and the police would have enforced it. But concerning what Zenani did, I think we lack adequate information to make pronouncements. That's my personal view. Now, I do not support what Zenani did, and I do not object to it because I do not know why she did it. And it is very, very important to understand that there are cultural issues that may have been considered here, because after all, this is a royal family from Abatembu. So people have to consider all the factors involved before they make unfounded claims and start calling people's names, because as I said, this is a family feud, and this family is very peculiar. Consider what I have shared with you here today. Which of our families have ever given a child a hand grenade to put in their school bag? Can you see that? This is a very, very peculiar family. Which of our families have ever written a long list as to who should come and not come to a funeral? Which of our families have ever gone and fetched an interdict from a court of law as to who should not be buried where? So this is very important for people to consider as they analyze it before putting in print things that are accusatory in their nature and are simply nothing but spewing or regurgitating the propaganda that the media seeks to create. Remember, it is the media that has called Zoleka a Mandela. Zoleka has never been a Mandela from birth until death. She has been a Hlongwane right throughout, according to the Xhosa tradition to which she belongs. Okay, guys, you can give me your views down below. I thought I should do a video that would be slightly different from the current narrative that is prevalent in the public. I have obviously not sought to diss Zoleka nor sought to diss Zenani. I have simply sought to bring a neutral ground here that will show you facts as they currently are, because many people are afraid to tell the truth when people are deceased. I don't suffer from that, because from childhood I have seen one of my grandfathers telling the truth about one of my uncles in a funeral. Nobody liked it, but that's how it happened in my family. And from that day onwards, we never lied about anybody in a funeral in my family. I don't think it is good for anybody to, because in any case, the person is now deceased, they are not here. So it is very important for people to understand that. No matter how much lies therefore you now tell, they're not going to change the eternal destiny of the one that is deceased. Now, I'm not pronouncing as to where has Zoleka gone. No, not at all. That's not my job. I'm simply pointing out what should be obvious to everybody. This worship of the deceased is nothing but idolatry, and it must cease. We shouldn't be beyond, or rather, we shouldn't be persuaded not to be able to criticize actions of an individual simply because they are deceased. We shouldn't suddenly create a saint out of a deceased person and overlook. Look at what I've just read for you. Zoleka was at loggerheads with everybody in her entire family. Who lives their life like that? I am not passing judgment on her. I'm simply giving you the facts that are there in black and white for you to see. From the Mandela family, there are people that are mentioned not to come to a funeral. To Madela family, there are people that are mentioned not to come to a funeral. That's her grandmother. Mandela is a grandfather. And then you come to her aunt, which is from her mother's family. And then you go to her husband. You go to what to call her father, which is now the Hlongwanes. You go to her husband's family. All these families from which she has a direct link, these families that, for an example, we normally say to people at work, you shouldn't prioritize work so much so that you don't take care of your family, because when you are not well, your family is going to be there for you. Your job is not going to be there for you. Your colleagues are not going to be there for you. But in this case, she has completely done the opposite by the way things look, because everybody in her family she was at loggerheads with. That does not speak well of any individual. Of course, you can go ahead and criticize the video. As I have said, I am not siding with Zenani. I do not know why Zenani did what she did, but also I cannot promote what Zoleka did. People's wishes as far as death, it's called umyolelo. Umyolelo is to the extent was done. We know what is umyolelo. A wish to give a list of people who shouldn't come and divide the families of those who are alive and remaining behind. That's not a wish that can ever be fulfilled by anybody. That's a divisive wish. Okay, guys, that's it. I'm out of there. Of course, you are able to, rather allowed to have a contrary view from mine. Those are my personal views. I did not know Zoleka personally, but just based on the information that she put in the public domain herself, in the social media, in the book that she wrote, I'm able to come to the conclusion that I have come to here to say that it appeared as though she was at loggerheads with everybody in her family. And as for where she was supposed to be buried, I don't think we should be in a hurry to judge, because the fourways estate is for the Mandelas. And it is clear that she was not a Mandela. Unless we want to convince ourselves of a lie and believe a media narrative that has never been true from birth to death. For an example, of course, I'm not going to tell you my surname, but there are people who knows my surname. The point is this. If I were now to choose that I should be buried in my father's Kojolinkomo, right? That means Amabele, Epela would be mad. Observe what I would be doing. I would literally be creating a war between Ompangomo and Amabele, simply because a son of Amabele wrote a letter before he died and didn't even bother communicating it. Okay? I don't want to be hot of this matter, but this matter is extremely divisive in its nature for those of us who literally understand our traditions and culture. If I were to leave such in a note that I don't want to be buried, there shouldn't be anybody from Amabele in my funeral, and I list people from Glotata, this is problematic. I hope you guys can see it. And of course, I did this so that I can give you a different view than the narrative that is in the media, where Zoleka is being created as a victim, and all these people are abusing her. No, 1,000 times no. Even without Aunt Zenani's interjection on this matter. The letters that she has written, the letter that she wrote, and the things that she has said there, and then she's now not here to substantiate those things through evidence. That's problematic. Place yourself in the shoes of the people that she wrote there, particularly the ones that she has accused. Does it mean she was not sexually abused? It doesn't mean that at all. But remember, sexual abuse is not something that should be allowed for anybody to say, Mang sexually abused me and that's it. Why? It has serious connotations. It changes other people's lives. People have been falsely accused and spent years in jail for a crime they didn't commit. So, sexual abuse of any woman should be punishable in law. When somebody has been found guilty, should be punishable in law. And I'm one of those people who advocate for a death penalty for rapists, for an example, for sexual abuse. So I get extremely offended when people take sexual abuse and make sexual abuse allegations the way she just did now. Because this is a serious offense to which now we have no way of proving except for she said it. Therefore, what does it mean? Does it mean it's true because she said it? Can you see the dilemma that she's left behind? Even the public is divided on the matter. Can you see that? This is a problem, a serious problem at it. But nevertheless, as I said concerning Aunt Zenani's actions, I do not know what would possess a person to do what she did. Safe to say, the judge agrees with her. And therefore, all reasonable, prudent people would say, well, there must be reasons in law, and therefore, such reasons need to be aired publicly for us to be able to comment. But other than that, we will just be a nation of gossips if we want to go forward and be angry and animated on things we know nothing about. Those are my views, guys. You give me your own. Ciao, ciao.